Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, my psychotic entitled mother-in-law constantly degrades us and manipulates my wife. She tries to steal our inheritance and forges documents to make our life hell. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. My mother-in-law is somebody that me and my wife have as very little contact with as possible. My wife is an only child and feels bad, so she has never been able to 100% cut her mother out of her life despite wanting to on many occasions. She is not a very stable woman, and the older she gets, the more entitled she thinks she is to everything. It got to a point that my wife made herself sick trying to please her mother, and I promised myself and her that I would never let it get to that point again. 10 years into the marriage, and I have kept that promise by stopping things before they even have a chance to happen. This is especially prevalent around the holiday times when my wife feels guilted to spend at least one of those days with her mother. Of course, I always go along because there is no way I am leaving my wife alone with that crazy woman. It would end with my mother-in-law making comments about the food or about how horrible a daughter my wife is until we go home, and my wife would then cry. With me there, I can at least run interference and have no issues telling my mother-in-law off and that my wife is amazing. So, jumping the story away for just a moment, I need to mention my father-in-law. He divorced my mother-in-law years before I knew the family at all and is the much better parent. Honestly, if he raised my wife alone, she would have had a much better mental state than having to deal with her mother. Me and father-in-law got along like best friends, and he really did consider me like a son. I said did because a couple of years ago he passed away and the entire thing was devastating. Now, mother-in-law had been fighting the will and things like that for some reason, so that's why there was a time gap between his death and this story. He had money put aside and a very generous inheritance was left for my wife. Hell, he was such a nice guy that he even left money to his ex-wife, knowing how horrible of a person she actually is. This might have been a way to try and get her to not try and fight the will, but I guess it didn't work. So what I didn't know at the time was, and what nobody actually knew for a while, was that my father-in-law had added me to his will. He really saw me as a son in such a way that he wanted to give me something after his passing. That came in the form of a home in a countryside that me and my wife had always been fond of. We lived in a city but always talked about giving that up to live somewhere a little more rural and slow moving. I think it was his way of telling us to go there and be far away from our mother-in-law and the problems that she was always causing us. Like I said, I didn't know it at the time, and mother-in-law, in all her fighting of the will, had somehow managed to hide it from us. So then we spent about 6 months not knowing and thinking that the only thing that was left to us was the money for my wife, which she was finally able to get. Mother-in-law was fighting because she believed that even though my wife was a grown adult and married, she should not be in charge of her own inheritance. Instead, as her mother, she should be in charge of holding it and deciding when and how it could get spent. Once she got the money, we were talking to a lawyer of our own, wanting to make sure that we did all the right stuff with it. Making sure we pay the right amount of taxes and the best place to put it to get interest and that sort of thing. Honestly, we never had this kind of money before and wanted to be careful with it so it didn't all get blown, and so we didn't get into any legal trouble on the financial side. Since there are different kinds of trusts and inheritances, I guess our lawyer wanted to see a copy of the will. So then we had to contact the mother-in-law lawyer, who was the one who had it for some reason, and send it over. When our lawyer asked about the property that was left to me, we were both confused. That was when we found out about the property and got excited about it. Then back to confusion of why this was never mentioned before, and I just knew mother-in-law had something to do with this. While our lawyer was not the right kind for this type of thing, he did refer us to somebody else who said he could help look into things and where it went wrong. About 2 weeks later, we got a call saying that we were not told of the property because paperwork exists that has me signing over the rights of the property to mother-in-law. This is something I would have remembered doing, and I told the lawyer that it never happened. He agreed to open a case where we were claiming the documentation was forged and wanted it looked into more deeply. Then we took a drive to the property to see what was going on over there with it. I was worried she was doing something like selling it, and I wanted to make sure that everything got paused while we figured it out. Mother-in-law was actually at the property and I had no ability to filter myself or play nice. I started yelling and asking why she would fake the documents and say that she owned the inherited property. She told me that she deserved the house after dealing with father-in-law for so many years and that we didn't. We didn't suffer or work hard enough to deserve the money or property that was left for us. Also that she was not gonna allow me to take her daughter out of the city and away from her. Like I was some villain trying to keep her daughter away from her mother. Mother-in-law called the police on me, saying that I was trespassing on her property. Since she had the fake documents, the police told me that I had to get off the property or she could have me arrested. I knew that she would do it too, so I had no choice but to get back in the car and drive away from my own property. My lawyer though was not worried and said that based on what he saw, any judge would agree that what was signed was not my signature at all. She argued in court more that I had gifted her the property, but in the end she did lose. We were given the property and she was arrested for forgery of documents and using it to attempt to steal the property. More digging found that she used some of the money father-in-law left her to pay off her lawyer, to not mention the part of the will where I got the house. She was so entitled and in her own world that she thought it would be a good idea to call the judge an idiot on top of everything else. She ended up behind bars and her lawyer ended up getting disbarred for being bribed to go against legal rules when it came to wills. While I am glad she is finally where she deserves, it's still extremely stressful for us. Due to the lifetime of manipulation, my wife thinks that it is her fault at times and I have to remind her that her mother is just crazy and entitled. We are currently making plans to leave the city and move into the country house for a kind of new start. One without crazy family or the stress we had in the city. Something more quiet and hopefully relaxed after years of chaos and dealing with a psycho Karen being in the family. And yeah, ripe stars, I hope that OP and his wife now have some closure, with this awful mother-in-law finally being behind bars. Honestly, I cannot imagine having such a person in the family, and I'm very glad that my family is not as crazy as this. Anyway, if you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post a comment if you want to support me. Thank you so much. The next one is a revenge story. After my wife and I got married last year, we decided that we should both get on the same phone plan. We went down to AT&T store and met with a representative who told us we would both be on an unlimited plan for $70 per month all in, including taxes and fees. And damn, ripe stars, that is expensive. How much do you pay for your phone plan? I think here in Thailand I paid the equivalent of like $5 or $6 for unlimited internet for 1 month. Anyway, I was very specific about getting the all-in price for the service. It seemed like a decent deal, so we signed up. 2 days later, I log into the website and see that there's already a bill for $139. I call up a rep to see what's up and they tell me that between the activation fees, taxes and surcharges, the bill was actually correct. I told them what the salesperson told me and they basically told me to pound sand. I promptly said that I wanted to cancel the service and wanted the $139 waived. They said they would cancel the service but could not and would not waive the bill. They also told me if I cancelled immediately, my wife and I would lose our phone numbers, which is true, so I figured since I already have to pay for the month and I don't want to lose my phone number, I will just get a new carrier and cancel when I'm ready. So I do my research and find Visible, which is excellent, and we make the switch. I call back to AT&T and inform them that we have switched carriers and wanted to cancel the service. I again ask for a refund. The rep informs me that since I have had the service for 4 days, I'm not entitled to a refund anymore. He tells me to read the fine print on the contract, which indeed tells me that I have 3 days to cancel for a full refund. I am now fuming because the first CSR that I talked to on day 2 denied me a refund if I cancelled. So I ask for the next level of CSR and they send me to a customer care and retention person. I explain the entire fiasco to him and how I feel that I have now been lied to twice by AT&T reps, sales rep and first CSR. He is a really cool guy and apologizes and says he will take care of it and will completely waive the bill. I'm very thankful and hang up thinking that this is finally resolved. Fast forward a month and I get an AT&T bill in the mail saying my payment was not received and is now late. I again pick up the phone and call AT&T. I eventually make my way through 2 CCR reps until I get back to the customer care and retention department. This time I did not have the chill dude, and instead I got a very smarmy woman who said that the bill was due and I would owe the entire amount. I asked her to please check the CSR notes and that the last guy told me he would waive the amount. She put me on a 10-minute silent hold and came back and said she would escalate the matter to her supervisor. She said I should receive an email by the end of the week with a resolution. 2 weeks go by, but no response. I call again. This time I get a very nice lady that is sympathetic. She says she will waive the bill. She comes back and tells me that she cannot do anything because the bill has already been sent to collections. She said not to worry and that she will send a letter to collections to have them waive the debt. I ask if this will go on my credit report and she says no and that they will take care of it. 6 months later, I get a letter in the mail from Sequoium Asset Solutions out of Georgia trying to collect on the $139. I immediately send them a letter via certified mail demanding that they verify the debt since it's obviously bad. I then hear nothing for 2 months and then I get an alert that I have a negative mark on my credit. I go in and sure enough, Sequoium has indicated that the amount is in collections indeed. I immediately write letters to all 3 bureaus requesting that they remove the remark. A month goes by and every single one of the bureaus removes the mark. Thank God. But then another 3 months go by and then I get a letter from Sunrise Credit Services in NY again trying to collect on the debt. That's truly unbelievable because it appears that Sequoium could not verify it, so instead of apologizing and waiving the debt, they just sold it off to another collection agency. I sent another certified letter to Sunrise demanding verification and I get nothing in reply. So far they have not attempted to put a mark on my credit. That's where this part of the story ends though. Who knows what will happen next? I could file a lawsuit, but the filing fee alone would be more than the amount owed. Here's the thing though, I'm not cash strapped. I am blessed enough that I could easily pay the $139 without making a dent in my budget. I have lost 5 times that amount in hours spent on the phone and writing letters, but I'm determined to go to the mat with AT&T on principle alone. So this brings us to the revenge stage. You see, in addition to my day job as an attorney, I am an elected city councilman in my town, and when I was going over our monthly expenses, I noticed that we were paying AT&T close to $6,000 a month for our phones, internet and TV services. We are a fairly small town, so it was pretty obvious that we were being bent over by these clowns and that we could save a ton of money by switching. I started working with our city manager and IT director on finding another solution. We quickly discovered that by switching to various carriers and providers that we could save half. I never would have looked that closely into our telecom expense had AT&T not jerked me around. And by the way, Ripe Stars, what I don't really understand here, how can you not look closely into your telecom expenses if you pay $6,000 a month for this stuff? Either that was a typo or OP is incredibly rich. Anyway, 2 weeks ago the resolution to switch was put on our meeting agenda and the council voted to pass it. We decided to completely cut ties with AT&T. Our city is saving a ton of money, getting better service, and with the money we saved from switching, we were able to hire another part-time animal shelter employee, which we desperately needed. I highly doubt our city would have considered switching if I didn't make such a stink about it. AT&T will end up losing hundreds of thousands over the coming years because of this, and I hope it was worth it for them. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta agree, some of these telecommunication companies are just some of the worst. They try to scam you whenever possible, so you have to be really careful with them. Obviously though, I have no experience with the American ones. Anyway, the next one is titled Revenge Story Number 2. So I work at an auto parts store, TM with manager Bob. No one likes working with manager Bob. He makes racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic and otherwise inappropriate comments constantly. I'm one of the few workers who can stand working with him, as I ignore him, but even my patience has limits. Slight background, both myself and Bob are veterans. He is Chair Force Reserves, myself being a Marine. We are both straight white male Christians, so I'm probably the only worker he has any respect for. Anyway, I am on a closing shift with Bob and our delivery guy gets here. Bob notices his nails are painted blue. Bob decides he should tell me how he must be a cross-dresser or gay to have painted nails. I don't know, I zoned him out mostly as per usual. Petty revenge of the story, I am closing with Bob tonight. I showed up with sparkly purple nail polish on. He has not been ignoring me but hasn't been going out of his way to talk to me either, which is highly unlike Bob. I think I like painting my nails and will continue to do so. For those asking, he only commented, "Really? You painted your nails?" and then gave a disappointed parent anticlimactic overall, but I know it bugs him still. And honestly, Ripe Stars, I just don't understand why anyone would give a damn if someone has painted nails or not. Is your life really that boring or uneventful that you have to care about something like this? Anyway, if you enjoyed the stories, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much. Neighbor gets expensive smart home appliances installed on Wi-Fi with no password. Calls the police when I let them know that it is bad. Hi all, I remembered this story from a year or two ago while I was browsing for a spotlight I could turn on and off from my phone. Not related to the story, but my dog wants to go to war with some foxes who keep accidentally turning the motion-activated spotlight, which Fuzzface considers dire provocation. I was farting around with a crappy laptop's Wi-Fi card and saw I had an access point I could connect to that was not there before. Signal was so-and-so, and I had my own internet, so I didn't bother trying to use that one, so I sort of just forgot about it. About a week later, I was unplugging some stuff and accidentally unplugged my wireless router, and while it was unplugged, my phone found the next accessible Wi-Fi access point. Which was the one I had found previously and not really bothered with. Not my circus, not my monkeys, you know. And then my phone pops up saying I need to install all of these smart home apps to make the appliances work. Which did not make sense. I'm enough of an IT guy to know that unless there is a burning need for it, home automation is not really the best idea. Absolutely no telling who can access that info. These people had their garage doors, heating and air conditioning, lights, interior and exterior, televisions and refrigerator hooked up. All of them were hooked up to a Wi-Fi with no password. In the industry we call that dumb as a bag of hammers. Once I plugged the router back into a piece, the suddenly irate family members wondering where the internet went, I hooked up my dog and took him for a walk. Before I left the house, I installed the smart home app and turned on one exterior spotlight and then looked for the house it was attached to. Presumably, if I was able to use their Wi-Fi, they were in line of sight. Once I saw the light that was on, I turned it off to make sure. House was on the next street over directly behind my house. There's a huge hill in the way that the builders left because Mother Nature did not flatten my part of the country as a courtesy, so lots can be next to each other without being accessible. That meant going the long way around. My dog is an adorable 35-pound cockapoo who has much better people skills than I do. When I have to go talk to people I don't know, he comes along because he is about as threatening as a wet noodle. Don't tell him I said that, and I cannot be that bad a man if my dog is as awesome as he is. So we make our way over to the neighbor's house and I knock on their door. A nice older lady answers it, old enough to have moved out kids but not old enough to be considered a Q-tip in my humble opinion. She forgets to ask what I want and immediately goes gooey all over my dog, and her husband hears the adorable appreciation sounds coming from his front door and investigates. He too is floored by my dog's awesomeness. There is about a minute of him getting all the attention and I thought building a report before I remember why I am here. I ask how they like their new smart home stuff and they immediately start getting weirded out. Husband says, "We like it just fine. How do you know we got that stuff?" Please don't take this the wrong way, but you don't have a password on your wireless. My phone connected to it by accident and told me about all the stuff you had installed. Wife cocks her head to one side and husband's brow starts developing a thunderous quality. I start talking faster. I'm just here to let you know that you really should put a password on your Wi-Fi or anyone can use it to do stuff like open your garage doors. Husband's brow is now in full fury mode and he opens his mouth to presumably shout at me, but before he can, the wife says, "Oh, that's what the installer guy was talking about. He kept saying I needed to encrypt the thingy or something like that. We have never bothered with a password because it is a pain in the butt to set up and remember." Husband has gone from thunderous fury to bewilderment and he looks at his wife and says, "Encrypt the what now?" I don't feel like setting all this up for these people and appliances and networks for them, so I say, okay, gotta go, bye. I power walk away from their house, and once clear, we mosey back towards my house. About 2 hours later, someone starts knocking at the front door to my house. I live in an in-law apartment in the basement of my parents' house, so that is not my door. My mother answers the door and then stomps down to the door to my part of their house, throws it open and tells me the police are here, again in a frosty voice. I hustle up the stairs and there is Officer Dave, not his real name, but the only officer in my town at that point who knew about computers to actually have a conversation with me without getting a must-smash nerd face. I say, "Hi Dave, what is?" He cuts me off before I can even finish. "You promised me you were done with this after that whole Main Street thing. You effing promised and now I look like an a-hole." Whoever had set up the timing on the stoplights for the main road through my town after some pretty serious construction did an absolutely awful job and traffic was horrific. Me and a locksmith friend decided to fix the problem after reporting the problem to town hall and got nowhere. We didn't break anything, he picked the lock and I hacked the light and then we locked up when we were done. We then got caught on the last light. Only reason I didn't go to jail was because Dave backed me up and made everyone wait a day to see if traffic was better, which it was. I then promised him no more shenanigans. "What? I haven't done anything," says I. "Then why the hell am I getting calls about you opening and closing people's garage doors and turning their lights on and off?" To be fair, that did sound like the sort of thing I would do, not to break into someone's house just to mess with them. I am mischievous, not evil. And then the light dawns. I point and ask, "Did you get called by the people living in that house?" Because I went over there a little while ago to tell them they needed to put a password on their Wi-Fi, and the only thing I did was turn on a spotlight to see which house it was. Nothing more than that. I swear to God. "They don't have a..." There's a thud as Dave facepalms. I let out a "yep" in sympathy. He sighs and says stay out of trouble and I wave by. Turns out their husband called the police and gave a vague description of me and the dog and said I lived nearby, and one of the other cops gave Dave a hard time about him cutting me slack before he drove out to talk to me. The couple got a call back to tell them the issue is resolved and please secure your Wi-Fi. 2 days later, there's a password on their Wi-Fi and we all lived happily ever after, except for getting the stank eye from that couple whenever I walk by. And the next one is titled, "Don't wanna help us pay to get your tree off of our house? Well, you can pay to get it taken away." So this happened a little over 6 years ago. I live in the Northeast and Hurricane Sandy hit my area pretty hard. We got lucky in that we didn't have a lot of damage to our house itself, our fences were destroyed and that was pretty much it. Except a 50 to 60 feet pine tree from our crotchety neighbor's property fell on top of our house. And guys, here you can see the actual picture of the tree just chilling on OP's house. There was no structural damage luckily, but the tree was huge and definitely got in the way enough to make getting in and out of the house inconvenient. Our homeowner's insurance would pay to move the tree off of our house and into the neighbor's yard, since the tree was theirs, but the neighbors would have to pay out of pocket to actually have the tree disposed of. The tree removal service that our insurance sent us told us it would only cost an extra $200 to have the tree disposed of, as opposed to the usual $600 because they would already be on site. So my mom, out of the kindness of her heart, called our neighbor to ask if he would be willing to pay us that $200, since again the tree belonged to them, plus an extra $100 or so to help with the insurance deductible, effectively saving them 300 smackaroos. Before even considering how this arrangement would benefit them, the husband berated my mom for begging them for money to deal with a problem that was not theirs to deal with. Mama Bear took this in stride and did not even try to change his mind. After all, she didn't have to pay to get the tree disposed of because either way it was going to be removed from our house, so she just told the tree service to lay the tree in the neighbor's yard for them to deal with. We got an angry phone call the next day asking why we didn't have the tree taken away, and my mom told the neighbor that he had the opportunity to save $300 but he didn't want it, so they ended up having to pay $600 to get another crew to come back out to the house and take the tree out of there. It is also worth noting that the tree destroyed the fence between our two properties, which belonged to the neighbors. The original fence was short and really only served to mark the property line, but after this fiasco, they put up a solid 7 feet fence, I guess because being able to see into our yard reminded them of the money they could have saved. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.